My high school was one of those sprawling mid-century buildings that felt more like a hospital than an educational facility. Endless linoleum hallways, flickering fluorescent lights, and a heating system that groaned like a dying animal. It was November of my junior year, and I'd managed to land myself in after-school detention for repeatedly sleeping through Mr. Harrison's history class. Detention was held in room 114, a windowless classroom deep in the basement level, usually reserved for surplus textbook storage. That afternoon, it was just me and Mr. Harrison. He sat at the front, aggressively grading papers while I stared at the clock, watching the second hand drag. At 4:15 p.m., his desk phone rang. He picked it up, murmured a few words, and stood up, looking annoyed. "Stay here. I'll be back in 5 minutes," he snapped, walking out and pulling the heavy wooden door shut behind him. The click of the lock echoing in the quiet room meant I wasn't going anywhere. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the rhythmic clanking of the metal air vents above my head. I put my head down on the desk, intending to doze off, but a strange noise interrupted me. It was a soft, dragging sound coming from directly above the drop ceiling. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. It sounded like a heavy sack of flour being pulled across the metal ductwork. I stared up at the aluminum grate. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding weak and foolish. The dragging stopped instantly. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, right above the grate, no more than 5 feet above my head, I heard a distinct, ragged intake of breath. It wasn't the sound of air moving through pipes. It was human, and it was right there. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Suddenly, the thin aluminum slats of the grate began to buckle slightly, as if something incredibly heavy was pressing its weight directly against it. Dust rained down onto my desk. I scrambled backward, my chair tipping over with a deafening crash. Through the gaps in the metal slats, a pair of pale, unblinking eyes stared down at me in the dim light. They were wide, bloodshot, and completely devoid of emotion. I screamed and threw myself against the locked door, pounding my fists until they bled. It took another 10 minutes for the janitor to finally hear me and unlock the door. By the time the police arrived and searched the ventilation shafts, they found no one. But they did find a nest made of shredded student files, a collection of half-eaten cafeteria food, and hundreds of photographs clipped from yearbooks. Every single photograph had the eyes scratched out. I transferred schools the next week, but I still can't sleep with the AC on, because sometimes, just as I'm drifting off, I hear the dust settling in the vents above me. I was the stage manager for our school's drama department, which meant I was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. Our theater was housed in a separate, older building on the edge of campus, built in the 1920s. It had great acoustics, but a deeply unsettling atmosphere when the house lights were down. It was a Friday night, a week before opening night for our spring production. The cast and crew had left around 9 p.m., and I stayed behind to organize the props and shut down the lighting board. The auditorium was pitch black, illuminated only by the faint glow of my small flashlight and the exit signs. I was up in the control booth at the very back of the theater, packing up my backpack, when I heard the unmistakable squeal of one of the heavy velvet curtains being pulled across the stage, I paused. "Hey, whoever's down there, I'm locking up," I shouted. My voice bounced off the empty seats and faded into nothing. I sighed, assuming one of the freshman tech crew had forgotten something and snuck back in. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way down the steep stairs to the main floor. I walked down the center aisle toward the stage. "Guys, seriously, it's not funny. I want to go home." As I approached the front row, I shined my beam onto the stage. Standing dead center perfectly still was a tall figure. They were facing away from me, wearing one of the dark Victorian coats from our costume rack. "Very funny, Ryan," I said, stepping up onto the stage. "Take the coat off. I have to lock the wardrobe." The figure didn't move. They didn't even breathe. As I got closer, the beam of my flashlight illuminated the back of their head. The hair was matted gray and distinctly unkempt. Nothing like anyone in the cast. A cold knot formed in my stomach. "Hey," I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure slowly began to turn around. As the face came into view, the flashlight slipped from my sweaty hands and hit the wooden stage floor with a loud crack, plunging everything into darkness. In the split second before the light went out, I saw that it wasn't a mask. It was a person, their face completely devoid of features, save for a wide, cavernous mouth stretched into a silent scream. I didn't wait. I turned and sprinted blindly up the aisle in the pitch black, slamming into seats and tearing my knees open on the armrests. I burst through the lobby doors and didn't stop running until I reached my car. The police swept the building that night and found nothing. The costume was back on its hanger, zipped up tight. But when we opened the theater the next Monday, there was a single, long gray hair resting on the lighting board in the locked control booth. To this day, I refuse to sit in a dark room unless I know exactly who is in it with me. I was a massive overachiever in high school, driven by the desperate need to secure a scholarship. This meant I practically lived in the AP chemistry lab on the third floor. Mr. Gallagher, my teacher, was kind enough to give me a spare key so I could study after hours. It was mid-December freezing, and completely dark by 5 p.m. I was alone in the lab at 8:30 p.m., the only sound being the hum of the fluorescent lights and the scratching of my pencil. I needed to use the restroom, which was at the far end of the long, unlit third-floor hallway. I grabbed my phone for a flashlight and stepped out of the lab. The school was deathly quiet. Every classroom door I passed was a dark void. I reached the bathroom, pushed the heavy door open, and went to the sink to splash cold water on my face. When I looked up into the mirror, my blood ran cold. Standing in the hallway, perfectly framed by the reflection of the open bathroom door behind me, was a woman. She was wearing a faded yellow dress completely out of place for the winter weather, and she was staring directly at the back of my head. I whipped around, heart in my throat, but the hallway was empty, just darkness. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and too much caffeine. I turned back to the sink, keeping my eyes downcast. But when I reached for the paper towels, I caught movement in the mirror again. She wasn't in the hallway anymore. She was in the bathroom with me, standing right behind the stalls. I froze, staring at her in the reflection. She was dripping wet, her hair plastered to her pale skin, her eyes dark hollows. And she was smiling, a wide, unnatural smile that showed too many teeth. I didn't look behind me. I knew that if I turned around and she was actually there, I would lose my mind. I slowly backed out of the bathroom, never breaking eye contact with her reflection in the mirror. She didn't move, just kept smiling that horrible wet smile. The second I crossed the threshold into the hallway, I broke into a dead sprint. I didn't even stop at the lab to get my backpack. I just ran down 3 flights of stairs in the pitch black and threw myself out the front doors into the freezing night. The next morning, I told Mr. Gallagher I lost the key. I never went back to the 3rd floor after hours. But 2 weeks later, the school plumbing backed up. The maintenance crew found the source of the blockage in the 3rd floor bathroom pipes. It was a rusted antique locket containing a tiny photograph of a woman in a yellow dress. If these true high school horror stories sent a shiver down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying true encounters. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable in your school? Drop your story in the comments below. If you're brave enough to remember it,